Hello and welcome to the Cardiac Cats YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jacob Shorba, and today we are getting not into the final video for summer scouting, but what will be our final positional video. So what I mean by that is that this is the last position we have to cover. We've done everything except for quarterbacks, and then after this, we will have at least one more episode. Won't be our last draft-related episode, most likely, before the college football season. We'll probably have like a big board at some point or just something to throw on there, right? We got to focus on Jaguars content too, of course, but summer's for summer scouting for me. And so we're going to have this quarterback episode today, and then next week we are going to be going through some of the prospects that I missed throughout this. So there's going to be some good names on there. I know I've got like 4 receivers. We've got guys like Ricky White, Elik Ayumaner. I probably said that wrong, as I always do. But we've got some fun players that we missed, and we'll see where they rank. I have not scouted any of them right now. I just finished quarterbacks probably 4 or 5 hours ago and want to get my thoughts out on these guys before it's been a few days. And, you know, this early in the process, it's easy to forget things. So want to make sure I'm doing this fresh. But getting into the quarterback class really quick before we jump into the actual prospects, it is a very interesting class. And we'll say that about a lot of positions, but this is truly different from what we've seen. I see a lot of people comparing this to 2022, where you had prospects that really were thought of as like not great first round picks. Maybe you could take them in the second. And no one was interested except for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They picked Kenny Pickett, and he's gone pretty dang quick because, honestly, like, just keep it simple with him, just wasn't producing, like, anything. There was no volume in his game. And there were other issues, of course, too. I'm not saying that's all it was, but it was a bad pick in the first round. Took him way too early, and then all these other players just haven't worked out. Like, Matt Corral really hasn't had a shot. You look at Desmond Ridder, and he was replaced by not one, but 2 quarterbacks in Atlanta. So it's kind of like that in a sense, to where there's not the first round guy, but this class is littered with tons of talent on day 2. And that's where I had, I think, 12 of my 14 prospects falling, and I could see all 14 making it to be at least day 2 picks. So it's a very interesting class. Of course, we'll have players that will probably return, especially some of the younger ones. There's some that really just are not that well developed at this point and would not go that high if they went to the draft now. So that's kind of where I land with this. But what's so interesting is it's really like a pick your flavor class. You know, what kind of players do you like? And you look at who could be QB1 at the end of this season, and when we get into the draft, I'd say probably 9 of these 14 guys have a shot. It is wide open. If you ask anyone, you're probably going to get a different opinion. Until you get to the 10th person, and then they'll give you a repeat, of course. But there's a lot of different opinions on this class. You're going to get mine here, and it really just depends on what you're looking for. So, like for Jacksonville, right, and for fans, you're probably not watching this mainly because, like, you know, we're drafting a quarterback to start, right? We just extended Trevor Lawrence, but while you might be interested, is a backup quarterback could be a concern in the future. Now, this season, of course, it isn't. CJ Beathard is on the team. I think this is his final year on this contract. He'll probably get extended, to be fair. And then you've got Mac Jones, who probably stick around 1 year, and I would guess at that point would be gone because he's going to get a better shot to start somewhere else, whether or not he does. It's pretty much locked down here that Trevor Lawrence is the guy for the next 5 years. We've talked about that before on this channel. It's obvious, right? So you could be in a situation where you might want to get that long-term backup, especially seeing last year that they only started Beathard 1 game. He played okay, and they probably could have used someone in those other matchups to be able to come in and take over so Trevor could have got to full health. That might have changed the trajectory of the season. So I think it's important, especially with an offensive line that has only marginally improved this offseason. I think the center upgrade was a pretty big deal, but Mitch Morse is an older player. This is not the same Pro Bowl guy unless he just has, you know, this revival late in his career, but it's hard to bet on that, right? So we could be looking at backup quarterbacks. That's kind of what I'm getting at. And there's some guys I think who could fit the bill in here. I'll try to shout them out. But that's what we've got here. So 14 guys. We're going to go from my last one all the way up to my top guy. I will be probably skipping summaries this video just because a lot of the time it's super repetitive. It's just me saying the same thing over, reading what I wrote on them, and I've already done that. So we'll change that up this time. My first guy, and this is one of 2 prospects I have on day 3, is Donovan Smith out of Houston. So he's an older prospect, not as old as some. He's going to be probably turning 24 in the middle of his rookie season. But this is someone who has prototypical size for the NFL. He has good rushing ability. He's not like an elusive player, but he's someone who has good straight line speed, and he has the size, as you can see at 235, to almost play like a running back at times and just bounce off guys. He can truck people. You don't see that all the time, but the capability is there. So he's got this nice dual threat build, and then obviously the size to where he's going to see the field really well. Now, of course, being last on this list, there's going to be obvious concerns. I'm going to get to those, but we're going to start with positives. We'll go to concerns after, and then we'll talk about some other things. Now, before I do that, just want to explain what these abbreviations are on the right. Sometimes I forget to do that, so I want to make sure you guys know. We have one extra one as well this time. I felt like it was hard to kind of keep things to 6 categories, especially with quarterbacks, and this will probably update over the season too, what I'm going by. But you've got the same ones in size and athleticism, and then you have throw power, which is that THP. You have accuracy, ACU. You have decision making. So decision making is going to be like turnover rate. You know, how much are you giving up the ball? Are you reading the field? Are you choosing the right guy? Whether or not you're successful, you know, we might have a guy who's not accurate, but he's maybe making the right decisions. So I'm not going to knock him twice. And I can say, hey, you're doing the right thing. You're just not throwing it well, right? So a little bit different of something there. But that's what we got for decision making. PUP is play under pressure. So that's going to be when you're possibly getting sacked. Are you elusive? Are you able to make the big throw? Are you going to take the hit to complete the pass? What are you going to do? You know, do you elevate in the tough situations? Or it might not just be like a pressure or a sack, but how do you play at the end of a game? When your team's down 4 points and you need a touchdown, maybe you got a minute and 1 timeout. So that's what those all mean. And then lead is obvious. That's leadership. I think that's a very important thing to mention here. Originally I had it as mentality, but leadership, the way I've kind of scouted this is I'm imagining for these players, based off interviews I've watched, what teammates say of them, are these guys going to be able to take control of a locker room, get guys to believe in them, and how are these guys going to play in big moments? You know, are these players that are self-centered, that just want a bunch of money? Or are these guys who are going to go in the playoffs and they want to go kick someone's ass? You know, that's important. You can have a guy who's super talented. It doesn't matter at all if he's not going to go out in the playoffs and play well. You look at most teams in the NFL now, they can look great during the regular season. They don't do jack crap in the playoffs because they don't play the same brand of football. I don't get it, but we have a lot of that in the NFL today. So these are all things I've got involved here. And then we don't have pro comps on all the players. There's a lot of unique guys in this class. Now, with Donovan Smith, you can see I don't have a pro comp. The guy I was closest to putting down was Joe Milton. It's in the sense that both players are these like big arms, you know, got cannons for arms. Players that can shoot it down the field. They can really hit wherever they want. They have a lot of throw power, but the accuracy is just kind of generally off. The processing, the developmental side of it needs a lot of work. But why I didn't go with it was because I felt like that's kind of a hit against Donovan Smith, where I think he's more developed than what Joe Milton was. Because while I felt like he was pretty close to Joe Milton early in the film, some of the bigger games I started watching, he started having some decent moments. He had some nice passes. And so you find a little bit of that with Donovan Smith, where he's able to make these nice plays. It's just moments, though. That's the big problem and why he's so far down this list. But hey, this is a guy with prototypical size. He's a really good runner, so he's a dual threat kind of guy. He's not like elusive per se, but he's tough. He's going to power through people. He's going to knock people to the ground. If defenders are not ready to tackle him like any other player, and they think they're just going to be taking down a quarterback, they're going to be in for a harsh reality and a harsh awakening. So really like that about Donovan Smith. While his accuracy is a big question mark, right? I gave it a D- as far as the grade. He has moments where he will, for example, throw a bullet pass down the field to a guy who's closely covered, and he will drop it in the bucket. He will hit him quick, and he'll get a big play off that, and it'll be in big moments. He has those moments on the field. And so that's why I can't really like give him an F there or go much lower, but he's got to consistently make those plays at least more often. He also, this is going to be a theme you're going to see with a lot of these players. He's not someone who fumbles a ton. He still has some issues, but a lot of these players are really bad about it. You've got guys in here that are averaging like 15 fumbles a season. Not good stuff. But funny enough, Donovan Smith probably was the best one of all as far as it goes with fumbles. Took care of the ball pretty well in that regard. Last thing I'll say about him as far as positives, this is the guy who's a really good leader. You watch interviews from him, he's got an outgoing personality. He builds relationships with his teammates. He transferred from, I believe it was Texas Tech. And a lot of guys on Houston didn't really like him a whole ton. I think because of like the rivalry before, and I believe Smith beat him in a game the previous season. And Smith didn't let that really knock him down, but he just went and talked to guys, right? He built relationships with them, and you can hear from players that didn't really buy in at first that changed their mind when he came there and when he actually built up that locker room. So I like his leadership ability. I think that's definitely a plus for him. So that's a good thing about him. It's a lot. It's not just the tools, right? But he's got that mentality as well. He's just got to start doing it on the field. He has to develop. That is the biggest thing with him. So concerns here, a lot of interceptions late in the season. Early on wasn't as bad, but a lot of turnover-worthy plays as it went on. He also played some tougher opponents. As far as his throwing speed and his motions, it's very inconsistent. Sometimes he will just laser that ball out. Other times he'll be winding up and just doesn't have the same speed on it. But the ability is definitely there. I mean, he's got all the throw power he needs. He's also someone that is just not that accurate of a player, especially when throwing deep. It's kind of all over the place. You get plays where it's pretty obvious he's not throwing it away, but he's 10 yards off the target. Or he's throwing maybe to the very edge of a receiver's frame. And when you do that, sometimes the receiver goes for it, tips off their hands. Now you got a live ball up in the air and someone can pick it. So you get turnovers like that you don't love. He's also a player that just does not progress through his reads. He will stare down guys. He will have predetermined plays. He knows where the ball is going before. And when the ball can't go there, he either tries to make it go there, which will end poorly too often, especially in the NFL, or he will sometimes panic and end up running. Occasionally, he'll go to other reads, but you watch him on film, his head is usually facing one direction the whole play. Now, one other thing with him, while he had some big plays under pressure, he generally doesn't play well in those situations. He doesn't have the processing skills right now to be able to determine what the alternative is. He just kind of ends up crumbling at times. And so you also look at like PFF numbers here. He threw more interceptions than touchdowns in those situations. I think he was one of the only players that I scouted that was in that situation. So those are my thoughts on Donovan Smith. I think this is a really nice developmental prospect, but if you're looking at him as like someone who can elevate to first round status, sure, the tools are there, but the leap he would have to take would be crazy this year. And I just don't think I see that happening. But my grade for him, I was teetering between 4th and 5th round. I went with 5th round for now. I think he could go up higher. I could see a team taking a shot on him early just because of what could be there. And then the film I watched for him was UTSA, Texas Tech, and Texas. All these teams in the South, especially in that state. But all those games were from 2023. So let's go ahead. Let's move on to our next guy here. I've got Jaxson Dart. This is my final day 3 guy. He is an early 4th round pick for me, and someone that it just wasn't really impressing me a ton with anything. I mean, you see the grades. There's not a whole lot of positives or a whole lot above average, but one thing immediately I'm going to note with him that stood out. You talk about leadership. You talk about someone taking control and command. This guy was out there this offseason recruiting players to his team. He was helping with the process with his head coach. This player could be a head coach down the road, is even what his own guy said. So Dart is impressive in that regard, and he got players to commit to Ole Miss because he reached out to them. So that was impressive to see from him. One of the last things I learned when I was scouting him, but love to see it. Love to see that kind of mentality. This guy wants to win. But getting into like positives here, you know, his size, well, it's not incredible. Hey, it's adequate, right? It's good enough to play. It's not going to be a detriment. And that's really important, because if you don't have size, it's hard to justify being a top quarterback unless you're just special. You know, and we'll talk about a guy like that later on in this video. But Jaxson Dart, he is a generally accurate player. Not super impressive, but he gets the job done, right? Not a lot of major issues. And once in a while, you see some great throws where he has this pinpoint accuracy. He's also a dual threat quarterback. He uses his legs often. He will absolutely take off when he needs to. And as far as managing the pocket, he does a good job avoiding pressure. He does a good job extending plays. He takes care of his job before he's throwing the ball. So you'll love to see all that. This is a guy as well that, while he's kind of got average size, he does have good arm strength. He can put it where he needs to put it. He's not going to go throw it 80 yards down the field, but it's still a positive. You like to see that. So not a clear limitation there. So there are tools to work with for him and things that will excite you. But there are also some concerns here. Similar to the last guy we talked about in Smith, he stares down receivers. Just does not scan the field that often. There are a lot of predetermined throws in this offense. His accuracy as well does fluctuate a bit too often, especially on deep passes. That's where you see the arm talent kind of start to waver. You know, still, like most quarterbacks, or the average quarterback isn't going to be able to nail deep passes all the time. Dart has kind of got that same problem there. He also will make some questionable decisions, such as refusing to throw away a pass or throwing in the triple coverage at times. It's like nothing scares him about throwing to a receiver who's clearly covered. Even if it's not just one guy, but 3 people around him, there's times where he's just like, F it, I'm going to throw it up. So you don't like to see that. He's got to work on that. He's also someone that, as a rusher, just took a lot of unnecessary hits. He just does not slide. I don't understand why that is. You don't see that a ton from quarterbacks. You'll see it accidentally, but it was a common thing in the film I watched on Dart. And along the same topic, he had a lot of fumbles, like you'll hear with about every prospect here, but you wonder why. You don't want to be taking hits that are unnecessary, and he takes quite a few of them. And so getting back for a moment here, kind of wrap up concerns about his decision-making, his processing. When his first read isn't open and he can't run the ball, he goes in the panic mode. And he will make those bad decisions, and that's when you'll see him throw those passes in a triple coverage or whatever it may be that will end up often getting picked off. So this is a player very much like Smith that you want to see the awareness and football intelligence continue to develop. I just put Dart above Smith because I think that he's got a little bit more there. I think the accuracy he's got more to work with in that regard, and I think those things make up for where he is as far as the tools compared to what Smith has. So that's where I land with Jaxson Dart. But, you know, overall, I think he could make it for a while as a backup in the league, but we'll see. As far as starting potential, I'm not sold on it, but I can see a team giving him a shot at some point. We'll have to see what happens. Now, getting into our 12 day 2 guys. The first one I've got, he's a late third for me. It's Leonard. He just transferred to Notre Dame this offseason, played for Duke before. One of the games I watched, I believe, was against Notre Dame. And actually, on that topic, real quick, on Jaxson Dart, film watch was Alabama, Georgia, and Penn State from 2023. Want to make sure I get that in there. But getting back to Riley Leonard, this is a guy with good size, right? 216 is a little lean, but 6'4", he's going to be able to see the field well. He's got room to add mass. So clear NFL traits there. He has good arm strength for the NFL. He has plenty to work with. He is a confident player. He doesn't shy away from a difficult pass. He's not afraid to try to make something happen. And the coaches, when you ask him how he performs and what they think of him, he's seen as an ultra-competitive player and someone who wants to earn it. He's seen as a great leader on that team. So I gave him a very high grade. And that's important. It's something you want to see. And Leonard absolutely has that leadership ability. He's also a legit rushing threat. He can make people miss in the open field, and he has the high-end speed to go all the way. I think I saw one play when I was watching him, I think it was against Clemson. He ended up actually juking out Nate Wiggins, which, if you don't remember, Nate Wiggins ran a 4.28. So, I mean, yeah, Nate Wiggins probably had a little more size on him, given it wasn't the combine, but Leonard can scoot. Leonard can move, and he has to be viewed as a dual threat quarterback. So that was a fun part with him. He's also first guy on this list that has active eyes. He will keep surveying the field. He doesn't get stuck on one read. He makes sure that he's always looking for the open player. And while he's not really that great under pressure, I gave him a very low grade there, he does have the rushing ability to escape. So you'll see times like where he starts to get pressure. If there's a way for him out, he'll take off. He'll be decisive with that. He'll be able to pick yards up on the ground. He is a tough player as well. He didn't shy away from playing his same play style of running and passing after suffering a leg injury last year. And that is a little bit of a concern too with that leg injury, because one of the concerns I'll mention here is that he does apparently have a lingering lower body injury heading into the season. That was apparent in the spring. I have not heard that has gone away to this point. He claims he feels a lot better, but we'll have to see, right? We get a lot of false information from teams, and usually it's in favor of what they would prefer. So something to watch, but you know, Leonard is a guy that the occasional great moments that you see, it's not the whole game. It's not any of that. But those great moments show that there is a lot of ceiling with him. And he's going to be a guy I think a lot of people are going to like. Now, getting into the concerns, we mentioned the injury issues. He did not play a full season last year, right? He was out for part of the year. He hurt himself. I think he came back for a game, and then he was out like a week or two later. So you don't like to see that. You want to see him stay healthy, and you know, we'll see if he can do that behind Notre Dame. I'm sure he wishes he still had Joe Alt, but you know, Alt's on the Chargers now. Other things with Leonard though, just doesn't really manage the pocket well. He's constantly running into pressure. When he senses pressure, it's almost like it's a magnet. And it's not something he's doing on purpose, but he just happens every time to run the wrong way. So it's not good, right? And that's why this pressure grade is so low for him. He also is someone that just has a very low completion percentage overall. His accuracy is rarely on point. You don't see a ton of that precision passing with him. So you want to see him be able to do that. A lot of the time, it's just these catchable passes, but they're not placeable, right? And you can manipulate that, and you can try to get a receiver moving the direction you want to get him to move. There's a prospect we'll talk about later that does a phenomenal job about that. One of the first things you see stand out about him. But Leonard isn't able to do that right now. He's also someone that will have a lot of turnovers from attempting those risky throws with that lack of precision accuracy. He tries to play hero ball a bit too much, and finally, you're going to hear this over and over, can clean up the fumbles. Too many fumbles for him, something he's got to work on. Now, once again, late third round pick for me. I think he could sneak in there. There's a lot to work with, and I think he's someone that teams are going to like, especially as a person. It'd be hard for me to imagine him not selling himself to an NFL front office. So exciting stuff there with Leonard, but still not super high on this list for me. The film I reviewed for him was Clemson, Notre Dame, and Florida State, all from the 2023 season. I believe Florida was the game he played while he was injured, so impressive stuff to see. Now, getting into almost our top 10, I've got a shocking name here because we've got a guy that was, I think, at one point given basically 50-50 odds to go first overall. That should tell you who it is. I'm just not high on him, and that's Shedeur Sanders. Now, I will go ahead and just say before this, I'm not a fan of Shedeur Sanders in general. Before this, I wasn't. Maybe that has some bias here. I still gave him an early third-round grade, and that's higher than some I've heard, right? But it's that a lot of these players fall around there. A lot of them have this potential, and we're going to see them either rise or we're going to see them fall at the end of the season. With Shedeur Sanders, I'm not sure he takes a huge step this year. I'm not sold on that. And I have major questions with his mentality around the game. And the things he says, the way he treats former teammates, I don't like any of it. I'm just not a fan. I do not want that guy leading my team. And given the pro comp here, I'll get into why I have that as the pro comp later in this evaluation. But if I see him as a backup and he's talking out here about, which teams he'll allow to take him first overall or whatever it may be, it's like, I don't want that on my team. I don't want a guy coming in as the backup and then, starting crap over that. But I'm just not a huge fan of him. I'll go ahead and blanket it with that to start, just so people are aware. But to get into notes on Sanders as a player, because that's what the evaluation is. But of course, factoring in the leadership ability, which I didn't give a good grade, as you can see, we're going to talk about him as a player. Last year, he had some big performances. He had games where he was putting up 400, 500 yards. So when things are going well, he is able to take advantage. If a guy is open, he's going to hit him, right? If you have an offense where you just need someone to manage the ball, to manage where it's going, and that's really all you're missing, Shedeur Sanders can do it for you. He could absolutely fill that role in the NFL, and I think that most likely he's going to be a starter. Just the way I look at him long term is that I don't see him being a 10-year starter for a team. I see him, like Bridgewater, kind of moving around between locations, being the bridge guy when they're going from one quarterback to the next, or maybe someone's got to develop. That's kind of where I see him right now. Now, getting back to positives, of course, because I'm getting off track quite a bit, he takes care of the football. He absolutely does. Now, there's a cost to that, but this last year, he only had 3 interceptions. Some of the best numbers you're going to see. In fact, I think that was the least amount of interceptions among all these quarterbacks who played the full season. He has really nice accuracy on the move as well. He can get out and run. He can hit targets. He's not going to have a problem with that. And his throwing motion is lightning fast. He can zip it downfield. He's got a lot to work with there. Now, the ultimate throw power, not really up to par, right? You're not going to see him go super deep that often, but if it's anything short to intermediate, he's going to do really well. He is also someone that can get the ball into really tight windows. He does it early and often. You see this all the time when you watch him. And when he gets pressured, it just doesn't impact him that much when he's able to get the ball off, and he's still accurate. Now, if he's going to get hit, it's a little bit different of a story. But if he's got room to make the throw, he's going to be able to do it. So those are my positives with him. Accuracy is probably the strongest thing in this game. I think he's very good in that regard. But why I gave him an A- is because once you start getting deeper down the field, you start to see the ball flutter a little bit. Now, getting into concerns, though, average height with a slightly lean frame. Not a huge deal, but just something to note. He's not going to have this massive advantage with tools over other prospects, so he has to make up for it with the way he plays. He was also a guy that had fumbling issues rise late in the season. One of the most obvious things about Sanders is how long he holds on to the ball. It is like he doesn't think sacks exist. He will just hold it, he'll get hit, and he'll do it again. And he'll do it over and over and over. I believe last year he took like 50 sacks. That's a disgusting number. That shouldn't be happening. And look, the offensive line was terrible there. No one's going to come out here and say it's 100% on Shedeur Sanders. But at the same time, start getting rid of the ball. Don't stand there. Like, you're the whole thing with that offense, that if you can't protect for long, you need to be getting the ball out quick. And he just holds it. He does not adapt to that offense. He will just take sacks, and that kills drives. And you see a lot of that for them, and that's why they went from 3-0 to 4-8. It's a big part of the reason. Too often with him, he is conservative. It's just the way he plays, his play style. He'll take the big plays when they're present, but he's not going to veer towards that more often than not. Most of the time, he's just looking for the check down. He's looking for the easy throw, and it's a minimal gain. And when you have long drives that you need to score and you're getting sacked all the time because you're not getting rid of the ball, it's not a good combination. It's just too often these conservative decisions, especially on third down. He will pass behind the line of scrimmage to receivers who have no chance of even picking up a new set of downs. He was not effective passing outside the numbers as well, especially on those intermediate distances. A massive portion of his throws were over the middle. So that is a strength, throwing over the middle, but you just don't see him doing a lot of that stuff on the boundary. And there were just times watching him where it just felt like there was no urgency in situations that require urgency. He's just the same guy. And that could be a good thing sometimes, but it could be a bad thing too. You know, the thing about Kirk Cousins in the playoffs with the Vikings, throwing a check down on 4th and 10, and his guy doesn't even have a chance to get the first down, but he still throws it because his mindset didn't change. Sanders has a little bit of that in his game, and it's not something you want to see. Now, just a couple other things here. You know, he can get outside the pocket to extend plays occasionally, but not really a guy who's going to create a whole ton. He's not going to have these huge wow moments. What he will do is he will carve you up if you're giving him the easy throws. He will absolutely take advantage of that. That is the biggest thing with him and where he could succeed in the NFL. And then just the final thing here, major concerns about character for me. Not everyone's going to agree with that. That's completely fine, right? We are a year out from the draft. A lot of things can change. I just don't see him being the guy that is going to look. There's a prospect in this class, I can't remember what his name was, that would take responsibility for his offensive line playing poorly. He would stand up for him. He didn't throw the blame on him. He didn't do any of that. You see even Marvin Harrison Jr. getting asked in this Hard Knocks episode about how his quarterback wasn't hitting him and the throws were terrible. He doesn't throw out the guy. He doesn't say, yeah, he sucks. Shedeur Sanders does. That's a big difference. I don't like that mentality. I question how much of a team guy he is. And I'm just not sold on him working at the NFL level as a high-end starter. I think he can start, but I also question, do you want to be the team that makes a long-term commitment to this kind of player? So that's where I sit with him. It's obviously a pretty harsh way of looking at him, but this is just where I am. I'm not that impressed. He absolutely has the opportunity to change that this year, but a lot of things have to change for him. Now, this comp to Teddy Bridgewater, to get in that for a moment, identical size, athleticism for these guys, very similar play styles, very conservative players. They're not going to make all these big time throws and go balls to the wall, right? Struggle a little bit with deep passing. They don't have the ideal arm talent that you want to see to get deep down the field, and it will be off target if they do that. They also struggle as rushers. Even though they have mobility, they just don't use it a whole lot. Shedeur Sanders very clearly, and I'm glad I didn't miss this at the end of the day saying this. He's a quarterback who wants to throw the ball. He is not a guy who wants to be a dual threat. He wants to be a pocket passer if he can be a pocket passer. If he has to run the ball, he will. It is the last resort for him. And the final thing here with Teddy Bridgewater, these are both prospects that just generally were good, but they just don't have those elite traits, right? And so for Shedeur, if I'm going to call anything elite with this game, I would give him the short and intermediate passing. He has great accuracy in that regard. But accuracy as a whole, I can't give it to him just because of throwing deep down the field. So there's my rant about Shedeur Sanders. I gave him an early third still for all the things I said. I watched Nebraska, Oregon, and USC all from 2023, and it'll be fun to watch him again this year and see what happens in Colorado. So getting to the next guy, and someone I thought I was going to have higher, but just can't really justify it at this point, is Drew Allar out of Penn State. He's a guy with prototypical size. 6'5", 238 pounds. A lot to work with there. I didn't give him this super impressive grade for athleticism, but if it was rushing, I would have given him a lot higher of a grade because he's going to be able to run through guys. He has that power. That's where this pro comp kind of comes in. It's not a perfect one, but kind of the same running style between Drew Allar and Josh Allen. I would say maybe more upside for Allar to be that, but very similar players, especially in the rushing game. Now, Allar, where this comp really is different, and it's not a perfect comp. He's like the conservative version of Josh Allen that's not going to make all the turnover-worthy plays, right? He's not going to be forcing the ball in places where it shouldn't go, but he's also missing out on opportunities because he's not aggressive enough. So Drew Allar will, at times, just watch his team end up going down because he's not making the big play, because it's not there. He doesn't want to risk it, and he's just kind of ignoring the fact that they have to have it. There's not enough time left, and you're down 2-3 possessions. You got to do something. But that said, you can at least say, hey, it's sound decision making. This is not a guy with a ton of turnover-worthy plays. He's protecting the ball really well. He also has great arm strength. This guy can get the ball anywhere on the field, and he makes some wild throws as well. Excuse my phone. One of the craziest throws you'll see was his first game of the season against West Virginia, where he throws completely off platform all the way down the field and hits his receiver in stride. That's not more than a moment. You see that once in a while, but that's impressive. And it tells you a lot about how much of a high-end developmental quarterback this is. And I would say, like, right now, probably not a guy who should declare this year. I would like to see him stick around another year, fully develop his game, or at least get to a good point. That's probably best for him, and I think he could be a first-round pick if he does that. I'm not sold he gets all the way this year, but we'll see. I'm absolutely rooting for him to accomplish that. Now, he is not afraid to take those easy, short throws. He'll take advantage of whatever they give him. He's not a guy who's just going to say, well, I don't want to take 6 yards here. I want to get the first down, right? He will play. He'll live for the next play, right? And he'll take what he's given, and that works pretty well, and it puts you in good situations. And then getting into concerns for him, we talked a little bit about some of it, but he does tend to panic when he's under pressure. He has these errant throws. There's one that I've seen probably 1,000 times on Twitter that's viral where he just throws into the middle of the field and there's no one even there. You're just like, what are you doing? But he kind of struggles under pressure. That's a big concern here. His completion percentage was also noticeably low. It took a huge dive at the end of the season, and you saw games where he was not even completing half his passes. And that was not just one time, that was like 4 or 5. So he needs to absolutely improve that. His accuracy just is not consistent. He's often going to make these receivers have to make difficult catches. So, and you get a lot of drops and uncatchable passes. It's just a bigger issue. He also tends to have poor awareness in the pocket. He needs to get more comfortable there. He'll sometimes just step straight up in the rushers, and he'll get happy feet at times. So he'll just kind of look like he's ready to run and almost looks like Gardner Minshew. That's another concern with him. And as a passer, his form is not ideal. He needs to get it tighter. He needs to get it out quicker. There's stuff that he can do there. As a leader, getting to that as a topic here, he has admitted that he needs to be a more vocal person and a more emotional person on the field. He's right now, you can see it the way he plays, but a very even keel guy. And so That's not great, but the fact that he at least acknowledges it and that he's taking steps forward, and I think his coaches even commented on that being the case, that's good to see. You want to see guys be accountable for where they're at and what they got to be able to do. Now, Allar is also a guy who's going to come from an RPO heavy offense, a lot of predetermined throws as well. He's not having to process too much of the field, so you want to see him grow. You want to see him be able to have the upside to develop into an NFL scheme. And, well, he has that really good throw power, which he needs to refine his way of throwing, of course. He just doesn't threaten the defense deep enough. He needs to get more aggressive. He needs to take those shots, and that's going to change the way that offense operates, because when you're getting deep passes off, they aren't going to load the box against you. They aren't going to make the short throws hard. They aren't going to kill the run. They're going to have to spread out. That's going to help your team out a lot. So I like Allar as a prospect. I really do, but I can't justify putting him as like a second round guy right now. If a team took him second round, that's fine, right? It could be good, but that's not the ideal landing spot. And I also think, like, comparing him to Josh Allen here, we're talking about Josh Allen as a prospect. Like, when he entered the league, that's what this comp is, essentially. I think Josh Allen was a lot closer, because I would rather have a player who is taking shots, taking chances, who can tone it down, than someone who's really just playing too conservative. It's kind of like when you're getting a safety, right? You look at Andre Sisco, for example. He was an ultra aggressive player coming out of college. He eventually was able to tone that down to the right level, and he's a ball hawk still. It's not like he doesn't get turnovers anymore, but he's also not giving up those big plays. So you like to see guys find the right balance there. I tend to lean towards more aggressive players, and Allar is just a super conservative player in the way he handles it. So that's the big difference here, but this is an upside comp, given Allen's career. Similar prospects with size, the running style, they're tall, they're stout. They got cannons for arms, but, struggled with that accuracy. Fell far behind their peers in that category. And while they're fast, these were guys who are more tough, right? You don't see Josh Allen go out there and burn the defense. You see him run through the defense. So that's kind of where I got that comp. I think it's a generally good comp. You just got to understand, where the major differences are with these prospects. So that's where I am on Drew Allar. One of my favorite players in the class, but a lot of work to do, and definitely a big risk for a team to invest in, which is why he's probably not going to be a first-round pick, even if he has maybe the most upside of everyone. Now, getting into a guy I hope to actually go see this year, since I'm only, I think, an hour away from campus, Jalon Daniels, Kansas quarterback. He's a fun player to watch. This guy is good at most things. And if it wasn't for injuries, which are the massive concern with him, probably going to be a prospect that could be in that top mix. I think he could be even an early second rounder. You could almost justify him for the first at that point right now. You could say he could land there, and he could at the end of the year, right? We saw Michael Penix go from, just another prospect to going, 8th overall? So it can happen. But Daniels, a little undersized at 6 foot. That's not ideal, but he does have a stout frame. At 220, that's the size you're looking for a guy that's 6'2". So he's packed a little bit tighter there. He's a legit rushing threat. He has really good speed and acceleration. He's going to threaten the defense. He's a dual threat guy. And when he runs, he's decisive. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't take time. He takes off, and he will plow full speed ahead, and he will catch the defense off guard. It is fast to watch. His throwing motion, it's really good. He throws with great zip. Actually, hold up. Let me correct that. His throwing power is great, right? He can throw well. He has zip on the ball. The throwing motion is a little bit different of a conversation that we'll get into here in a moment. He's a really aggressive player. He's not afraid to give his receivers a chance on contested throws. He's not necessarily just turning it over all the time, but he's throwing it to the right places. He's giving them a shot, and he's got some impressive moments doing that. Now, one thing you kind of worry about when guys get hurt is obviously, like with dual threat quarterbacks, are you going to be able to keep running? And so you obviously don't want him to run too much, but it really doesn't change the play style for Daniels. It's not like you see with Penix where he just never takes off. Like when you see Penix run, you're like, damn, he can actually be a dual threat quarterback. But Penix doesn't do it because he's, at the end of the day, and I don't blame him, like he's probably scared to get hurt again, especially in his final year of college football. That was the last year he could play. Daniels doesn't get afraid of that. He is not afraid to take a hit when he needs to take a hit. And I respect that with him. He also runs the RPO game well. Of course, you're not going to do a ton of that in the NFL, but he is good at it. And his personality, this is an infectious guy. This is someone who is going to be a part of a locker room that's integral. And he's been a big part of Kansas becoming a potential playoff contender. This is not a team that's supposed to be good at football. They're supposed to be good at basketball, and that's supposed to be it. But Daniels might have this team in those top 12 rankings and playing playoff football later this year or in January. Now, concerns with him, I already mentioned the height. The injuries, right? We've talked about that a little bit, but he has not started a full season in 4 years. 4 years of football. He's played mostly half the season. And this last year was a pretty bad injury for him. Like, I believe he had to have his family come to campus and help him out just with simple things because he was having a hard time moving. I think it was like a torso injury of some sort, but not ideal, right? That has to be factored in, and it's a big reason why he is where he is, because if it wasn't for injuries, this would be someone I'm probably ranking a lot higher. But that's the big concern, and you have to ask yourself, can he continue being a dual threat quarterback with this much of an injury history? It's the same question you're going to have with Penix, and you got the answer with Penix, right? He's going to be a pocket passer. That's how he's going to play his game. He did a really good job of it, and he earned his pick. That question is still out there for Daniels. Now, back to the throwing motion here. It is not as compact and fast as you want to see. It at times is, but it's not consistent enough. And so you want to see him be able to tighten that, be able to throw the ball, get it out a little bit quicker. Less things that can go wrong when you do that. Now, he's also a guy that just doesn't move his eyes around that fast. He will at least progress through reads, but he's not going to get off them very quick. He's not a super fast processor. He can stick on reads a little bit too long. His accuracy also just tends to be a hair off the ideal mark. It's not the end of the world, but he could be more precise about where he's putting the ball and where he's getting players to run. He's also someone who's really gutsy. And at times, he can be a little too gutsy. So you want to see him be able to get the right balance, but you love to see the aggression. You love to see that he's tilted towards that. You just got to get it in the right spot. He also, as far as pocket management, just tends to drift too far back. He'll just keep moving back, and that can lead to some big sacks, and he doesn't sense pressure fast enough at times. There's absolutely the potential for him to run out of it, but he won't always respond quick enough, and that can be, a big detriment. But ultimately, Daniels is the player I'm a big fan of. I'm really excited to hopefully get to go watch him in person, and another quarterback this year we'll talk about, Noah Fifita. But, Daniels has to prove that he can play a full season healthy, that the injuries are in the past, and be able to kind of start refining his game a little bit more, handle pressure better pocket awareness, and just all those things. I think there's a lot to work with here, and I'll be excited to see what happens. But he's an early third-round guy right now, and the film I watched Duke and TCU from 2022, and then Illinois from 2023. Now, getting into our next guy here, we've got someone who might, at the end of the year, for all we know, be holding up the national championship trophy. It's Dillon Gabriel, transferred to Oregon this offseason, and I'm really excited to watch him there. After watching his film, Oregon's going to be a team I'm going to turn on a lot on Saturdays when I'm looking for a game. It's just how it's going to be. But Gabriel, obviously, big concern here is size. right? It's 5'11", not the worst in the class, but that's bad. It's not what you want to see. And 204. So not great. He is stout, given the weight he has for that size, but you wish he was taller, and that hurts his ability to see the whole field. Now, there's a lot of things to like about him still, and a lot of reasons why I think he could actually be an NFL starter, and at the very least is going to be a hell of a backup. He's got a ton of production in college. He's got 4 seasons where he threw over 3,000 passing yards. You don't have those major injury concerns. He processes really fast, gets through his reads quick. He doesn't sit on guys for too long. And when he needs to, he'll use his legs. He's a dual threat guy. He has good speed, good athleticism. He can create in the pocket. He's going to give himself time to throw, and he'll be able to make those throws. He's not afraid to take a hit when he needs to take a hit. He stays poised. He is a guy that, as far as like leadership, he means the things he says. You see a confident player, and he plays like that on the field too. He will power through contact as a rusher, and he's almost built like a lighter running back in the way he plays. Exciting stuff to see. He's not afraid to fire in the tight windows. He has a high adjusted completion percentage as a player, one of the best ones of these prospects, and he's going to be a threat to complete passes if he can give himself enough time. He's going to be accurate. He's going to be able to get that done. His play under pressure was maybe a little bit of a concern. It has highs and lows, but I gave it a good grade because the highs are just brilliant. He has some great moments, and if you want to see a game that kind of established himself, and there was even like Heisman talk about it, go watch him play Texas last year. Oklahoma versus Texas, Red River rivalry. That was a good game. I was glad I got to watch that live on TV, but that was the game that introduced me to Dillon Gabriel. Final positive here. He has absolute confidence as a leader. He's a loud voice in the organization, and he has a good balance of having relationships and command of the team. You already hear from guys that are in Oregon, like how he is one of them. He fit in quick. He has those strong relationships, but he knows when it's time to play, right? He knows when it's time to goof off. He knows when it's time to go kick some ass on the field. So fun stuff there. But there are, of course, some concerns here. He's obviously majorly undersized. He's an older prospect at 24 years old. And while he didn't generally fumble that much, it got out of control when he did. I think there were 2 games where he fumbled, and there were 5 fumbles combined in those games. So he's got to tone that down a little bit. He also he can get a little bit of speed on his deep passes, and that's good. Like, I gave him a positive grade for throw power, but kind of maxes out at that point, right? 5'11" guy throwing is not going to throw it 80 yards down the field, but maybe around 60 is kind of where his limit gets, and then you start to see the ball kind of go all over the place as far as accuracy. He will also miss open receivers over the middle of the field at times just because of that height deficiency. He cannot see everything that's happening. His precision passing isn't something that's constantly on point. He's usually a little bit off, and he can get too aggressive when throwing into tight coverage. It can cause turnovers. And that's the final thing here, is that he needs to cut down the amount of turnover-worthy plays he has. Now, my comp for him, I went with Matt Corral. Now, big difference here I want to note that I learned about, because I didn't scout Matt Corral. I'm going off of watching a little bit of film on him and just people mentioning it and his draft profile and all that. But Gabriel is a very mature quarterback. That's the big difference here. There were questions with Corral when he came out. Maybe that's part of the reason why he fell in the draft, but Gabriel is a guy that you're not going to have that concern about. But where the comp really comes from here is that, you've got guys that are dual threat quarterbacks that process really quick, and they have those gutsy moments on the field that will get you fired up. Both prospects that throw the ball quick too. They have quick throwing motions, lots of zip on passes, and occasionally you see that high level precision passing that you want, but it's something that's had to grow. Now, Corral has not really gotten off to to much of a good start in the NFL. I think he got drafted by the Panthers, and I'm not even sure if he's still there now. Obviously, they got Bryce Young, so he's not going to be starting anytime soon. But I could see Gabriel at least being a very good backup, but I think this is the kind of guy that could go out and earn a starting job somewhere. I don't think he's going to get like huge second contracts. I think he'll get backup money, but I think he's someone who can at least be a bridge starter, and maybe there's a little bit of upside for more. You could see him stepping in late in the season for a team that has disaster and turning it around, keeping an organization on pace. So this might be a guy you're talking about fits for Jacksonville as a backup. Gabriel would be someone you consider, but the main thing that would scare me a little bit is going to be the throw power, right? You've got an offense that has a lot of vertical threats now. That's a big change from 2023. So that's going to be an area where Gabriel might not be as strong, but I think he would generally be a good fit for someone who could be a backup. So really liked what I saw with him. He was an exciting prospect, early third round grade for me. And film I watched was Iowa State, Texas, and Oklahoma State, all from 2023. Now getting into our final day 2 prospect. Okay, let me reword that. Final third round prospect. That's what I mean here. I got Jalen Milroe, who I thought I was going to have higher. And that's not a knock on him at all. I didn't have him far off from where I expected him to land. And I think he's in a great situation to take a big rise at the end of the season. I could see Alabama winning the championship. I think their team is capable of doing it. But Milroe, what excites me the most about him is his leadership. And that's where some of this comp comes to Jalen Hurts. He is a phenomenal leader. He is someone who has been the same guy through adversity. He has put his team above himself through his actions. It's not just a matter of, he's saying he's going to do this stuff. He does it, right? He got benched last year. That's not a good thing, right? And that's why he's not like a first-round prospect. It's part of the reason. But when he was benched, he didn't go sulk about it. He went out onto the field and supported his guys. He's someone, you watch interviews about him, this guy wants to be a championship player. He wants to win the national championship. He's going to want to win Super Bowls in the future. That leadership ability is as good as it gets. So I love that with Jalen Milroe. Huge positive with him. But, stout player. Technically, the size would appear average, but he's ripped as a prospect. And as a rushing threat, he is special, right? He has special athleticism. He is going to be a nightmare for people to handle. He's super elusive when he senses pressure. He'll use pump fakes. He will elude players. He will throw everything in the kitchen sink to extend plays. You'll love to see that with him. He also shows these brilliant moments with ball placement. Generally, he needs refinement there. It's not an area where he's super strong. It's more so average, but the great moments are great. And there's just a lot to be excited about as far as potential there. This is a guy, getting back to talking about his leadership and how he will put the team above himself. He is not afraid to take a hit for his team. If he needs to stand tall in the pocket and throw, and it's going to be a touchdown, but he's going to take a big hit, he's going to throw that damn ball. He's going to take hits rushing if it gets him a first down. Whatever it may be, this guy is going to make the sacrifice. And he has all the tools and the mentality to be a great NFL quarterback. He's someone that I could absolutely see sneaking into early day 2, maybe even the first round. He'd be someone I'd very much consider investing in, even if he's 7th on this list right now. Now, the concerns for him, averaged roughly a fumble a game. That's not good, in case you didn't know. Accuracy is very inconsistent, and sometimes he'll just miss open targets, and you just don't expect it to happen, but he does. He was very limited as well in the passing game, and not a ton of huge performances. He's part of a run-heavy offense. That's what they do there. And he ran a lot of RPOs, so scheme change could be in store heading to the next level. He's also someone who didn't always sense pressure and he could get blindsided at times, which will lead to fumbles. He also tends to, given his rushing ability, bail too often. It can lead to unnecessary sacks instead of just giving the play time to develop and throwing it away if nothing's available. He'll make that decision quick to go run off and try to get yards, and it doesn't always work out. The best way to describe his play overall is just chaotic. That can be good, that can be bad, but generally it's unreliable. And you look at what happened with Alabama last year. It's kind of the story of how the team ended, right? They went from like huge upset by Auburn, where they were going to lose that game that was going to take them out, to all of a sudden they go from potentially being completely embarrassed to now they beat Georgia in the SEC championship and take Michigan to the brink. Like, that describes this guy in the way he plays. And so it'll be fun to watch him this year. He'll probably be back in the playoffs. I have a hard time believing they won't make it with Kalen DeBoer. So I'm excited to watch him. But my comp for him, it's Jalen Hurts. I think these are prospects that probably go similar points in the draft. Guys with identical builds, heavy presence as rushers, and they were both just great leaders with high character coming out of college. Just, you would not hear bad things about them. Guys who overcame adversity to find success. These are both prospects as well, talking more on the field stuff too. They struggled with decision making. They bail from throwing situations to rush. They also struggle with fumbles. So, things to clear up. But I think Milroe could be that next, maybe round 2 quarterback from Alabama that ends up being a steal for a team. I could absolutely see that happen, just like happened with Jalen Hurts. So for now, early 3rd round grade, but big fan of him. Games I watched were Tennessee, Georgia, and Michigan, all from the 2023 season. Now, getting into our final 6 guys, and this will be getting into 2nd round prospects, which is what we have the rest of the way. I do not have any 1st round guys. I got Connor Weigman. Gosh, I wish he'd spell his name right, but he doesn't, so it's sad. But Connor Weigman is someone with a ton of upside, but just has not played a whole lot. Very limited experience on the field. And that's the big question with him, because he played great in 2023 when he did, and then he started to struggle in his final game, and he got hurt, and he did not come back after that. So you could look at it like, damn, this guy is going to be like a star, and he might be the QB1, or maybe it was just a flash in the pan. So who knows? But we're going to figure out this year, hopefully, if he can stay healthy. It's the guy who he's got, I think a little bit above average size. He plays with confidence. He's not afraid to make tight throws. He completes them. He's like good precision accuracy when he needs it. He is a guy that has good throw power. He throws with some zip. And as a rusher, he's capable. He has good athleticism. You look at these grades, everything is positive. There's not really like a clear, massive area of weakness outside of experience. He also cleaned up the turnover-worthy plays in 2023. Just taking into account like how many games he started, it was far better still. He also has great moments under pressure. It's a good player in those situations. He does not collapse in the moment, and he will not shy away from taking the big hit to deliver the throw. Now, getting to concerns here, this is going to be kind of a shorter one compared to other prospects because there's just not a whole lot of film on him at this point. I still watched 3 games, but not a lot of starting experience. The first concern is exactly that. He has only played part of 2 seasons, and it was a small portion of each. He's also, as a leader, maybe not the most vocal guy in the room, but he does lead through confidence on the field. I think the kind of play he has, the poise he has, that's going to get people to buy into him. Now, concerns, in addition to that, he does tend to get over aggressive. He can make the bad throw and turn it over. Didn't see a ton of this in 2023 where it bit him in the ass. Didn't happen that much, but I still think it's there. He's also someone, as far as his pocket awareness, can improve that. He can be more aware of what's happening around him, and he needs to clean up the fumbles from his limited time rushing. He's also susceptible to turnovers when he's trying to force that big play. I think we kind of mentioned that before. He'll stick to reads too long, He needs to keep his head moving around, and his final game, some moments where he had spotty accuracy. Now, that was mainly only that game. He was pretty consistent the rest of the time, so that's where you got to kind of decide what to think of that. Those are the main concerns, though, with him. But still, like, this is a young, confident quarterback that made some of the best plays in this class. He's aggressive, and I think he can tone that in. I think he can end up potentially being the real deal after the season. But for now, he's relatively an unknown commodity. So that's where he is right now. He's a late second for me. Maybe more of an early third, kind of hovering on the brink there. And the film I watched for him, I watched Ole Miss in 2022. I think that was one of his first starts. And then Miami, Florida, and Auburn from 2023. Now, top 5 guys. For all the Florida fans out here, you'll like this one. Graham Mertz, the 5th guy, and it made sense why I put him here once I figured out the comp. And I listen to NFL Stock Exchange a lot for information, and they had a fantastic comp on him. We're going to talk about that with Kirk Cousins, but that's the way this guy plays. He feels like a clone of him almost. But getting into the notes on Mertz, he's a sound leader. The things he says he's confident in, and he will bring composure and steadiness to an NFL organization. And as you hear these things, like, think about Kirk Cousins. You're going to hear a lot of things that match what Kirk Cousins is in the NFL. Had an impressive completion percentage in 2023. Has good ball placement when throwing into tight windows or contested situations. He throws with tempo. He zips it in, lobs it in, however he needs to do it in the right situations. In the intermediate to short area of the field, he's dominant. That is where he is his strongest. And as far as accuracy, might even be an S-tier guy. It's just that deep ball accuracy. That's where he kind of limits himself, similar to Cousins. He's also a guy that did not have many turnover-worthy plays. He did have some late in the season, but generally he took care of the football. And he'll take what the defense gives him. He'll find receivers open constantly. It's very rare you find him without an answer. He graded out really well in blitz and pressure situations as well. Maybe a little bit of a difference there between him and like a Cousins, which Cousins does it sometimes, manage to do that. Mertz will use pump fakes to elude pressure when he needs to, so he has a little bit of that elusiveness and the creativity, and he rarely takes sacks. He will get the ball out on time. Not someone you're going to worry about making bonehead decisions that end drives. He will take over an offense and he will run it well, but you kind of know what you're getting with him. The concerns here, rarely pushes the ball deep. He had one of the lowest deep pass percentages in all of college football. It was almost like top 10 out of every player. He has a lot of underthrows when going deep as well, which is a big part of the reason why he doesn't do it that often. His accuracy just kind of starts to tank. It's not really on point as much as you want to see. He's also, as a runner, a bit of a liability. He'll take on contact and fumbles, so you don't want to see him do much there. It's not really where he's his best. And he's a very conservative guy with how he's making his decisions. Like, he is not going to take that many risks. He's not going to push the ball deep down the field for the reward that comes with it. He's going to take what he's given, and it often works, but sometimes it doesn't. And I'm not sure Mertz is going to be a guy who's going to win in those games, but still a lot to love here. Other concerns, he throws short often on third downs, relies on yards after catch a lot of the time to convert them. Going back to the Kirk Cousins comment from earlier with the playoff game, it's what I thought about when I watched Mertz. Like, one of the first things I'm thinking about, it's Kirk Cousins throwing the ball like 5 yards short of the line as someone's blanketed in coverage. But hey, he completed the pass, I guess. Like, it just doesn't matter sometimes because the drive's going to end or the game's going to be over if you don't get it. And Mertz is a very consistent player. It's not always good. Final concern with him, though, he will occasionally throw to players who are primed to get hit, so you want to see that get cleaned up a little bit, give him opportunity to create after the catch. So my comp here, this is very easy once I heard the idea of it. Kirk Cousins, identical size with these guys, slightly long frames, relatively conservative play style, but it's an efficient way of playing. Both of them were sound starters. They're guys that they're going to be seen as game managers. They're not going to have flashy moments. They're going to get knocked for that. Whatever. Who cares? Like, if you get a guy in that can start for you, if your quarterback goes down like this, you're going to take it. These are guys as well that they just take what they're given. They rely on the talent of the team around them to shine, and they just give them the chance to succeed. It's a lot of the excitement with like Cousins going to Atlanta right now. That's why Minnesota started to look good in 2022 with Cousins playing, because they had that talent around him on offense. So a lot of those reasons. Probably the biggest difference here, though, Mertz is 24. Cousins was significantly younger when he declared, so Mertz will be starting out his career a lot later than Cousins. But I felt like this was a pretty good comp here, and it's an interesting question of like whether you take this kind of player. If you're looking for a starter, it's hard to say you want Mertz for the sake of, do you want to commit to that long term? Now, on a rookie deal, it could absolutely work, as a bridge guy. I think the ideal situation that you want is he falls in the draft, you pick him as a backup, and he shines when he comes in and plays. I think that's the best case scenario. Like, for Jacksonville, getting back to that conversation, Mertz is probably the perfect guy to be the backup. Now, same issue with the deep passes, but he still, I think, can get it done decently enough. He can fire off passes maybe a little bit earlier, and it can work. But I think he's going to be a good player. I think he's going to be a guy that either has a very long career as a backup or probably ends up being a starter for quite a while. Just not one of the best of the best. So that's my comp for him. Shout out to NFL Stock Exchange for that. Trevor Sikkema, great comp. Totally stole it for this, but it works. Film reviewed was Utah, South Carolina, and Georgia, all from the 2023 season. Now, we've got 4 guys left, and the first of these guys was someone that I thought I was going to have super low, because I was like, holy crap, this guy is averaging like 3 opportunities a game for the defense to get a turnover on him, whether it's like a fumble he loses or a turnover worthy play. But he was good. Cam Ward, that is. So Ward, he's kind of average as far as age goes. He's going to be 23 right after the draft. He's a fun player to watch. And this is someone who lives for those high stakes situations. Getting into my positives, which this is a really long list of things. He fires off the ball. Fast throwing motion. Lots of zip on passes. Now, you will see in this picture, he does not throw the ball conventionally. It still works, but he just sidearms like every single throw. So a little bit wonky of form, but it's okay. He can get deep down the field on passes. He has great throw power. Not elite, but great throw power. As a rusher, he's not someone who's going to go out and like rush every play, be super dominant, but he's still a dual threat, and he does it really well when he does. He has high-end escapability. He is phenomenal at managing the pocket, and he's one of the best improvisers in this class, if not the best, at quarterback. He can get on the move when he's pressured. He'll extend plays. He'll fake out guys with pump fakes. He'll hesitate, not in a bad way, but he'll use hesitations when he's running. There's just a lot of things he has in his arsenal to make plays happen, and that's the name of the game for him, is he's going for the big play almost all the time. He is a decisive passer. He plays with little hesitation in that regard, talking 2 different ways here. Also someone that is going to be a huge fan favorite, already is. A lot of people love him because he has battled through hell and back to get where he's gone. He went from being at a lower end FBS level school to probably being in the playoffs this year with Miami, Florida. How do you not root for this guy? He is great to watch. Like, I loved watching him. He's going to be a guy I'm going to follow close this year. Won't root for him week 1 because he plays Florida, but someone I very much liked once I got to watch him. He's had a really productive career as well. 13,000 passing yards over 4 seasons. 13,000. That's like double what most quarterback prospects get. It's crazy. He will survey through the field, progresses through his reads adequately, doesn't have problems there. Well, he has this like clear and obvious issue on paper about turnover worthy plays and fumbles. The games I watched, it really was not that apparent. And that's why this could be an evaluation that goes off the rails this season. Because maybe he has those same issues, and those are the games I see. It might just be him getting kind of lucky here, but I felt like he was a lot more sound of a decision maker than I expected. Still way too aggressive, but better than I expected. He also has some great ball placement throwing down the field, has some phenomenal passes, and he is not afraid to give his receivers a shot. You give him a receiver who's going to pay it off, he's going to throw to him a lot, and it's fun to watch. He is a very good leader as well. This was the guy I was alluding to earlier, that he takes ownership of his offense. He stays accountable. He will take blame for other people to the media instead of throwing him under the bus. It's stuff you love to see, right? Now, what you're doing, behind the scenes, obviously you got to all be accountable for what you've done. You're not going to ignore problems, but that's a leader. Like that's a good guy to have in charge of your organization. And Cam Ward just has so many things that are going positive for him. And I think it just makes up for those major concerns, which we'll get into them now. Just for some numbers here, he's thrown at least 21 turnover-worthy plays in each of the last 3 seasons. Now, his interception marks are not the same at all. Like, you compare him to, take like a Josh Allen, who's super productive quarterback in the NFL, but also a guy who turns over the ball a lot. There's obviously the good and bad that come with his aggressive play style. Josh Allen doesn't have as many turnover-worthy plays, but he has like more turnovers still. So Ward, like a lot of these plays, I don't know if they're just counting more than they need to, but it just hasn't really bit him as hard as you would expect. Now, he does also have 37 fumbles over the last 3 seasons, and last year he had 14 fumbles in 83 attempts. That's disgusting. You don't want to see that. It's similar to Milroe, a fumble a game. So he has to clean that up. He has to protect the ball better. He's got to stop trying to go for the big play all the time. He just tries it all the time. He needs to tone that aggression down, and I hope that Miami can get him to do that. They also have some occasional lapses in accuracy. And at times, like, he's going to fire without hesitation towards covered receivers. You process the game that quick, you're bound to make some mistakes. He also could use his rushing ability more often because he does have special moments, but of course, fumbles. He don't want to do that more often because it almost makes it a liability too, with even with how special of a player he can be there. He also tends to hold on to the ball too long because he's trying to make a play. He needs to get rid of it quicker. I did see more plays than I expected going into this, knowing he was supposed to have this issue, where he did actually throw it away. But it's still a clear problem, something he needs to improve. As mentioned before, the form's a bit weird, sidearms pretty much every throw. And while he's not a terrible decision maker, since he often finds open receivers and hits them, he just looks for the big play too often. It's a big problem here, and that decision making will start to break down in games when he gets behind. So you go down 2 possessions and he's gonna panic, right? Like, still going to have some of those great moments. It's not like he just only plays awful, but you're just going to see a quarterback who's going 150% nonstop, and that's what Cam Ward is. But if you can tone that down with him, I think he could be a first-round prospect. And he might be the guy that I would invest a draft pick in if I was looking for a starter. So, love it with Cam Ward. Clear issues, of course, but a lot to love with him, and you watch the film and you'll understand why. But 2023 was what I watched. I watched Wisconsin, Oregon State, and Arizona. Now, getting into my top 3 guys, we've got 2 obvious names and the one straggler that I've mentioned before, but not a consensus top guy necessarily. But first one I've got here, my 3rd overall quarterback prospect, Quinn Ewers, similar to Cam Ward, early 2nd round guy. Now, getting into the notes on Ewers, the way he plays the game is really good. The size and the tools isn't really elite. That's where like maybe a little bit more of the concerns come in. He's supposed to have a ton of throw power, but the way he throws the ball really limits himself. So that's why that grade is kind of low. But getting into positives, he can adjust the velocity of his throws to hit receivers where he wants to hit them. His ball placement is phenomenal. He will keep receivers in stride. He leads them where he wants them. He does it every single play, and it gets extra yards every single play. That's special. That's a great trait to have in him. He's also someone who can get on the move when necessary. He's going to pick up the yardage he needs to. He is a master of those short yardage throws. If you're an offense that runs a lot of that, this is your guy. He plays with good composure. He's not a guy who panics, and when he needs to be creative, he had some fun moments. He would shovel past the ball when he's getting sacked and has a guy open. He's not afraid to take a chance there. Now, as a leader, it was a little bit more of my concern. Like, he doesn't really stand out a ton in that regard, but he is said to be taking steps forward. So it's definitely a good thing to see. It'll be interesting this year, though, of course, with the whole conversation about Arch Manning and even some speculation that he could be the starter halfway through the year. So I think Ewers is going to get challenged a lot in that regard, and we should know a lot more about his leadership capabilities by the end of the season. Now, final positive here, if he can clean up that form, the way he throws the ball, he could have top-tier throw power. Like, lots of upside there, but he's got to prove it. Concerns with him, needs to clean up the fumbles. It's not as bad as other prospects, but he's got an issue there like most others. The arm strength as well just isn't where it needs to be. He doesn't throw with a whole lot of zip, a lot of slower passes. His form needs work, right? Doesn't generate a whole lot of power, especially when he can't set his feet. He has a lot of quick throws. Doesn't really use his eyes much to fool defenders. He'll stare down targets, and a lot of his throws are predetermined. Not a whole ton of processing that's going on that you want to see. Now, his accuracy can get a little bit spotty at times, especially when he's under pressure, but it's not a huge concern. And I could see him being challenged when he gets to the next level, just given the style of offense he's running. Getting back to leadership here for a moment, like I said, just has not stood out a ton in that regard. So there's going to be questions there about how good of a leader he is. And finally, alluded to it already, but is he going to survive this season with Arch Manning behind him? So those are all the big concerns with him, but I still see a really good prospect with high upside and someone who could be really good for a good offense. But he's got an early second-round grade for me. The film I watched was Alabama, Oklahoma, and Washington, all from 2023. Now, getting into my top two guys, we got a Jacksonville native here for the first one. And Carson Beck. He's my number 2 overall prospect, and if he gets in the right situation, Cleveland Browns, he will be QB1 in this class. Hard to believe he wouldn't be that. So he's interesting, right? Like, I think the outcome, what he is in the NFL, is about as wide as it could get. He is, you see the Goff comparison, right? We're going to talk about that a little bit, but he is so similar to him, and you see the difference in how Goff performed with the Rams and how he performed with the Lions, and I think that's kind of what you're going to get with Beck depending on where he goes. But getting into my notes here, he's got a good frame with room to add size. He's a quick release, throws with zip. He has consistently high-level accuracy when he's in clean pockets. He will get the job done. He's not a guy who's going to fail you in those situations. In fact, I can't remember maybe even a single time he did. He has good presence in the pocket as well. He can move out of pressure. It's not these huge moves, but just subtle movement, manipulating where players are going. And he had respectable volume as a passer this last season. First year of being a full-time starter, and he played well. He's got good throw power. He's a guy who can get the ball where it needs to go. He's not a guy who's going to stare people down. He's going to keep moving through his reads, and there's not a whole lot of time between his decision and when the ball's hitting the receiver's hands. Quick throws. You love to see that. Now, the concerns here, he's not really that fiery or emotional of a player. For what you want in a quarterback, I have major questions there. He's also a guy that, like, he'll run when he needs to, but it's not really a plus. There's a lot of times where, like, he'll stumble into his own lineman, or he'll just miss extra yards. He'll go down early. He's not really putting himself out on the line to get the little bit of advantage that he can get. His play at the next level is going to be so dependent upon the performance of his offensive line. He sees a massive drop-off when he's under pressure, very similar to Goff, and why Goff has succeeded with the Lions, because they have what might be the best offensive line in the league. They keep him safe, they give him a surrounding cast, and he goes to town. And I mean, that team, they might go win the Super Bowl this year, for all we know. We'll see, of course, but like, that's a great situation for him. And Carson Beck, I think, very much needs the same thing, and that's why I throw out a team like the Cleveland Browns, that you go sit there for a year, you develop, and then that final year of the Watson contract, you can go out and start. You have a good team around you. They get cheaper at the position after they move on from Watson. They can retain that squad, and they're good for a few years and get an immediate starter. So one of my favorite fits as far as players here. But other things with Beck as far as concerns, does not have creativity. He bodes poorly when he's out of structure. He needs to know what's going on. He needs to be able to do it, and he'll get it done. He's going to be as reliable as it gets. He can clean up his accuracy as well. On the deep throws, they can be erratic at times. Not really a huge strong suit of his. And he just lacks those wow plays. He just hasn't shown the ability to this point to be able to step up in big moments. Not an it factor. And then the final thing here, bit of a fumbling issue. Had 7 fumbles in 2023. Needs to try to clean that up. Going back to the Goff comp for a moment, just to read through my notes here, they're borderline elite passers when in clean pockets. Best of the best that you're going to get. Keep the offense moving. Very rarely you're going to find poor plays when everyone's doing their job around them. But just ultimately are going to be guys who they get called game managers because they don't have those big moments, and you're going to see those drastic differences in play based on the surrounding cast. And so it's important for Beck to go to the right situation. If he goes to the New York Giants, well, that's going to be a shit show, quite frankly. He goes out to, say, the Cleveland Browns or a team with a good offensive line, I think this guy could make deep playoff runs. So he's really dependent on where he goes. But he's an early second-round guy. Now, with some of these players, like, if you're in on them, I'm totally fine with taking him in the first round. The value of the fifth-year option is immense. And so I think, like, Beck is the guy who probably goes in the first. But as far as where I'd rank him, it'd probably be as an early second-round guy right now. The film I watched for him was Kentucky, Florida, and Alabama, all from the 2023 season. Now, getting into my top guy, which is different from, like everyone else is, I got Noah Fifita. I felt like going into this, he might be the top guy for me, and he was. Just the way he played was phenomenal. He's a guy that impresses me. He is good at pretty much everything. The only knocks are the size, obviously. He's really small. He's going to be Bryce Young size. That is going to freak people out. And his projection is probably going to be heavily reliant upon where Bryce Young ends up being at the end of the season. But it's really just that. And then he's a gutsy player. He's aggressive, right? So the decision-making doesn't always work out, but I think he's going to figure it out. He hasn't played a ton of football. He's going to get more experience, and I think he's going to refine his game and become a really good player. He's the other quarterback I hope to see this year when he comes to Kansas. But positives about him, getting into notes here. Fast throwing motion, tons of zip. He is creative. He's going to be a guy who incorporates pump fakes, and he's going to be able to survive hits in the pocket. You see him be able to get out of sacks. And so, love to see it. He flashes that high-level accuracy as well. It's just moments right now. Let me rephrase that. There's moments where he'll miss, right? But usually, very accurate player. He is someone who will not stare down receivers. He will scan the field. He'll be looking all around. Of course, you have the issue of being able to see over the middle where the offensive linemen are, but you don't see it be as much of a problem as you'd expect. He is a confident football player. He's not afraid to make the big throw. He plays a gutsy brand of football. Senses pressure well. He's capable of rolling out of the pocket and just delivering throws on target consistently. You go watch him do an interview or talk with teammates or any of that. He has an infectious personality. This is a guy who will win over an NFL locker room. I have very few questions about his leadership ability. And while his arm strength isn't elite, right? He is obviously a smaller player. He has enough that's going to get the job done. I think he can throw it relatively deep. Obviously, more issues as you go farther down the field, but he's good enough there. Better than expected for sure, and a little bit above average. He's also a guy who doesn't fumble that often. Very rare note to write down there. And as the last season progressed, you saw a notable improvement in his game. And part of this is just keeping in mind the projection for these guys and how they're trending right now. Fifita is a guy on the rise, and I think if you take out size, might be the best player by the end of all this, and right now I would say he is. Now, concerns, of course, the size is not just a concern, it is a massive detriment. This is first percentile kind of size. Like, I think I even saw 0% when I was looking at it at one point. He is one of the smallest quarterbacks you're going to see. He clearly is lacking experience. Like, you see some decisions that are questionable, but still playing way better than you'd expect for how much he's played. He is a slightly above average athlete, but not much of a rushing threat. He's not going to take advantage of that too often other than eluding in the pocket. And that uber aggression can lead to turnovers. It's just part of what you're going to get with him. And then you've also got those errant throws that he didn't really pay for them a ton already, but I could see him paying for them at the next level. So 2024 is an opportunity for Fifita to just start to refine his game, round himself out as a prospect. I think he's going to declare, and I think he's going to be one of the better guys. And my bet right now would be that he's worthy of a first-round pick, whether or not he goes there. So those are my thoughts on him. I didn't have a comp. You think about Bryce Young a little bit or Kyler Murray, but I didn't end up doing it here. I think Fifita's got a very fun way of play that's unique in its own right. But these four top guys in Fifita, Carson, Beck, Quinn, Ewers, Cam Ward, all very close players. Early second-round guys grouped up together, and at the end of the day, like, who knows who's going to be first in this class. But that's what I've got right now. That's all our positions done. We'll have, as of now, I think 16 prospects I'll be reviewing that I have not had on the list yet. So I'll be looking through them. Hopefully I'll have the video out on time, which would be June 28th. And we'll wrap this thing up and be ready for the season and kind of monitor it. But get into the football season as well for your Jacksonville Jaguars. So I appreciate you guys watching, everyone who has. I know these are long videos and stuff that's kind of far out in the future, but hey, we're an off-season channel. This is what we do here. We're not always going to be as much in the moment. I do plan to have content for you guys during the year. Hopefully game recaps, kind of looking at advanced statistics, where the team is, and hopefully kind of tying that all together with the team building process for your Jaguars. But that's our plan, and hopefully we'll have more videos for that pretty soon here. But thanks for watching. Hope you all have a great rest of your day. Enjoy yourselves. Enjoy the off season. We don't got that much longer left. We're getting really close, but that's all I've got. I'll see you guys on the next time.